phone call came at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, which was unusual in itself. My grandson Tommy never called during the week. He was too busy with hockey practice and homework and whatever else 13-year-old boys filled their lives with these days. But there was his name on my cell phone screen, and I felt a small flutter of concern as I answered. "Tommy, everything okay, buddy?" There was a pause, filled with the sound of shallow breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight, strained in a way I'd never heard before. "Grandpa, don't go home tonight." I'd been standing in the hardware store, debating between two types of wood varnish for the bookshelf I was building in my garage. The can in my hand suddenly felt very heavy. "What do you mean, don't go home? Tommy, what's going on?" I can't explain right now, but please, Grandpa, stay somewhere else tonight. Go to Uncle Ray's or get a hotel or just don't go home, promise me." The fear in his voice sent ice water through my veins. Tommy was a level-headed kid, not given to drama or pranks. In 13 years, I'd never heard him sound like this, like he was barely holding himself together. "Tommy, you're scaring me. Is someone hurt? Is your dad?" "Dad doesn't know I'm calling." He was whispering now, and I could hear a door close softly in the background. "He can't know, but I heard him talking last night, on the phone, and Grandpa, I think he's planning something." My son, Michael, Tommy's father, the boy I'd raised, taught to ride a bike, helped through college, the man who'd grown distant over the past few years, especially after his divorce from Sarah, the man who'd been asking me increasingly pointed questions about my will, about the house I'd lived in for 43 years, about the life insurance policy I'd taken out when he was just a baby. "What kind of something?" I asked, my mouth dry. "I can't say more. Someone's coming. Just please don't go home tonight. I have to go." The line went dead. I stood there in the hardware store, holding my phone and a can of varnish, while my world tilted sideways. Around me, people examined paint chips and compared drill bits, going about their ordinary Tuesday afternoons, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. My name is Frank Morrison. I'm 72 years old, a retired postal worker, widower of 15 years, father of 2, grandfather of 3. I've lived in the same house in Riverside since 1982. I've never been a paranoid man, never been one for conspiracy theories or drama. I believe in evidence, in what I can see and touch and prove. But I also believe in my grandson. I set down the varnish and walked out of the hardware store without buying anything. My hands were shaking as I got into my old Ford pickup. For a long moment, I just sat there in the parking lot, trying to think clearly. Michael had been under a lot of stress lately. The divorce had been brutal, Sarah had gotten the house, and the custody arrangement meant he only saw Tommy every other week. He'd lost his job at the accounting firm 6 months ago and had been living in a cramped apartment, struggling to find work. He'd borrowed money from me 3 times in the past year, always promising to pay it back, never doing so. Last month he'd brought up the house again. "This place is too big for you, Dad," he'd said, walking through my living room with an appraiser's eye. "Have you thought about selling? You could move into one of those nice senior communities. Wouldn't that be easier?" I'd laughed it off. "I'll leave this house feet first, Michael. Your mother and I built our life here. I'm not going anywhere." He hadn't laughed with me. His smile had been thin, cold. "Well, we all have to go sometime, don't we, Dad?" At the time, I'd dismissed it as a thoughtless comment from a stressed man. Now, sitting in my truck with my grandson's warning echoing in my ears, that comment took on a darker shade. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I could trust absolutely, my brother Ray. "Frank, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "I need a favor, a big one, and I need you not to ask too many questions right now." Ray had been a cop for 30 years before retiring. He knew when something was serious. Name it. "Can I stay at your place tonight? Just tonight, probably. I'll explain later, but I need to not be at my house." There was only the briefest pause. "Doors unlocked. I'll put coffee on." The drive to Ray's house across town took 20 minutes. I spent it trying to figure out what to do. Call the police and tell them what? that my grandson had a bad feeling, that my son had made some uncomfortable comments. I had nothing concrete, nothing actionable. But Tommy's voice kept playing in my head, the terror in it, the certainty. Ray met me at the door, took one look at my face, and handed me a bourbon. Sit, talk. I told him everything, about Michael's financial troubles, about the questions regarding my will, about Tommy's call. As I spoke, Ray's expression grew darker. You think Michael would actually hurt you? He asked quietly. I wanted to say no. I wanted to laugh and dismiss it as impossible, but I thought about the Michael I'd seen lately, bitter, desperate, angry at the world. I thought about the way he'd looked at my house, calculating its value. I thought about how he'd stopped asking about my health and started asking about my assets. I don't know, I admitted, but Tommy believes it, and that kid doesn't scare easily. Ray nodded slowly. Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're staying here tonight. Tomorrow morning, we're going to your house together. We'll look around, see if anything seems off, and we're going to figure this out. I slept poorly that night, jumping at every sound. Ray's guest room was comfortable, but my mind kept churning. What had Tommy heard? What was Michael planning? And what would happen when he went to my house tonight and found me gone? The next morning, Ray and I drove to my house just after sunrise. Everything looked normal from the outside. My white two-story with the blue shutters, the oak tree I'd planted when Michael was born, the flower beds Barbara had loved so much. Ray insisted on going in first. He'd brought his old service weapon, which made the whole thing feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. The house was quiet, nothing seemed disturbed, but as we walked through the kitchen, Ray stopped suddenly and pointed to the basement door. It was slightly ajar. I always kept it closed. We went down the stairs slowly. The basement was dim, lit only by the small windows near the ceiling. It took my eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, I saw it. Someone had tampered with the circuit breaker. Wires had been pulled loose and rerouted in a way that looked almost accidental, almost, but not quite. Ray examined it closely, his face grim. "This is rigged," he said quietly. "If you'd come down here and touched this panel in the dark, which you would have, if the power went out, you'd have been electrocuted. It would have looked like an accident, like you'd tried to fix the breaker yourself and made a fatal mistake." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My son, my boy, had really planned to kill me. "There's more," Ray said, pointing to the floor near the breaker. A small puddle of water had been strategically placed where I would have been standing, to ensure the current would be fatal. We called the police then. They came, they investigated, they took photos and statements. By noon, they'd gone to Michael's apartment and taken him into custody. They found emails on his computer, researching electrical accidents, looking up home electrical systems, reading about inheritance laws. Tommy had heard his father on the phone the night before, confirming the plan with someone, apparently a drinking buddy who'd backed out at the last minute. That's what had prompted the desperate call to me. The trial was 6 months ago. Michael was convicted of attempted murder. He'll be in prison for a long time. I see Tommy every week now. Sarah brings him by for dinner, and we talk about everything, school, hockey, life. We don't talk much about his father, but I know it weighs on him, the knowledge that he saved my life by making that impossible phone call. "I'm proud of you," I told him last week. "What you did took more courage than I can imagine." He just shrugged, 13 and uncomfortable with praise. "You're my grandpa. I couldn't let anything happen to you." I still live in my house. The wiring has been completely redone professionally, but sometimes, late at night, I think about that basement, about what would have happened if Tommy hadn't called, about how close I came to walking into my own house and never walking out. They say you never really know what someone is capable of until they're pushed to their limits. I learned that the hard way, but I also learned something else, that even in the darkest moments, when someone you love becomes someone you can't recognize, there can still be light. There can still be that one phone call, that one warning, that one act of courage that changes everything. Tommy saved my life, not with strength or violence or anything dramatic, just with a whispered phone call and 4 words, "Don't go home tonight." Sometimes that's all it takes, sometimes that's everything.